Welcome to Santa Clarita Weekly, where we cover all things local in Santa Clarita Valley every Saturday morning at 9 on KQRU 107.9.
Welcome back to another edition of Santa Clarita Weekly with Tim Haddock and Sage Rafferty. I'm Sage. He's Tim. You can listen to us on the radio at KQRU 107.9 FM on Saturday mornings at 9. We're also on YouTube and Instagram, and you can find us online at santaclaritastar.com. So in the race for Congressional District 27, Democrat George Whitesides has outraised Mike Garcia, who is the incumbent Republican congressman. We're going to talk about this and why this is happening. In sports, the Hart baseball team moved into first place in the Foothill League standings with a pair of big wins over West Ranch. The Valencia softball team won 2 games and stayed undefeated and in first place in the Foothill League. Saugus won 2 games and is in second place in the Foothill League. Hart took a tough loss to Saugus and dropped to third place in the Foothill League. The Dodgers are in a bit of a funk, going 2-4 last week, losing 2 games to the Washington Nationals and 2 games to the New York Mets. And in auto racing news, Colton Herta, who grew up in Valencia, right here in Santa Clarita, was in the Grand Prix of Long Beach in the IndyCar Series race for the Global Andretti. Tim was able to interview Colton and ask him about his hometown, Santa Clarita. So, Tim, let's start talking about Whitesides outraising Garcia. So I wrote something on the website about this, but new FEC numbers dropped. And in CA 27, Democrat George Whitesides has outraised incumbent Republican Congressman Mike Garcia. Whitesides raised around $1.3 million in the first quarter of 2024. This brings his total haul to $4.3 million for the election cycle. And Mike Garcia raised $674,000 in the same period and has raised $3.6 million for the cycle. There are really 2 root causes for Garcia's lackluster fundraising. There are a number of reasons, and Whitesides did contribute some of his own money to the race, but there's a number of reasons. But the first one, I think, is the ouster of Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House. McCarthy was a close ally of Mike Garcia. His district was, right next to Mike Garcia's district, which is Santa Clarita's district. McCarthy was a prolific fundraiser who raised millions of dollars for Republican congressional candidates around the country and very much helped Garcia in his first few election wins. And the second thing is donor fatigue. And Donald Trump has sort of killed the golden goose. Donald Trump has been one of the best fundraisers in the history of Republican politics, especially when it comes to small dollar donors. But the Washington Post recently reported that Trump has exhausted his vast fundraising network through constant emails and text messages asking for money. And this has been a real problem for all the way up and down the ballot because they all get money from the same donors. So this has been a problem for Mike Garcia and just Republicans around the country, especially in those close Senate races. You see that they're the Democrats in almost every Senate race that's close have dwarfed their Republican counterparts.
Right. So, I mean, this all sounds like good news for George Whitesides, right? I mean, it looks like he is going to have at least the resources to put up a strong campaign against Mike Garcia. But at the same time, I'm not sure this stage because I'm not really sure. It really hasn't translated into votes yet, has it? I mean, the last in the primary election, Mike Garcia still won that election by a huge margin. I mean, it was a very surprising margin, I thought. But you tell me, I mean, is this going to affect the election, and is this going to get people out to the ballot box?
I think there's a lot of reasons for the primary, and one of the reasons for the outcome of the primary is that there was a contentious Republican presidential primary. There really wasn't anything on the Democratic side, so Democrats just didn't turn out. And one thing that, like the Cook Political was saying, Cook Political is what a lot of media relies on for analysis. What they're saying is, don't pay attention to the numbers for the primary because, Democrats didn't turn out all the way across the country. especially in California, like it's going to be completely different ball game in November, like when Democrats actually turn out, and it's going to be much closer. The good news for the Democrats here is that, previously Republicans have tended to outraise them. I mean, it's always, the saying goes in politics that Democrats have the volunteers, but Republicans have the money. And this time it's sort of flipped. So the Democrats have volunteers and the money. And, they've just been asking for too much. Then there's another layer too that I haven't really mentioned, but the fact that the RNC is taking huge chunks of their money and putting it towards Donald Trump's legal bills. So there's a lot of Trump's campaign money that's going in there. And some donors are a little hesitant to donate. And I know one thing I mentioned, Lara Trump, who's the new co-chair of the RNC, was talking to ABC News, and she's saying, well, it's not going to the legal bills, but she's like, if you do donate to us, let us know that you don't want it to go there, which sort of, is sort of a contradictory statement. Like she contradicted herself within, talking to ABC News. So, so I do think, one thing too about Whitesides is George Whitesides is sort of reserved a lot of his money. So he has a lot of cash on hand right now. He didn't spend a lot in the primary. He didn't really have any opposition. So it didn't, if he didn't have any opposition, there doesn't really, he took the calculation that he wasn't going to spend as much money in the primary, but he was going to focus most of that money on the general election. So we'll see if that pays off.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like he has all the momentum right now. Let's just see how he uses that momentum as the election gets closer. So yeah, I think it's all good news for George Whitesides' campaign. Let's just see what happens in the next couple months here, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're listening to KQRU 107.9 FM in Santa Clarita. We're on the radio every week on Saturday at 9 a.m. And of course, you can find us on social media, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. So let's talk about sports. Let's talk about Foothill League baseball. Tim, the Hart baseball team knocked West Ranch out of first place in the Foothill League standings, winning 2 games against the Wildcats last week. Hart won the first game 2-1 and won the second game in a dramatic come-from-behind fashion 5-3. Saugus finds itself in a second-place tie with West Ranch, even though they didn't play a Foothill League game last week. So, and Valencia is sitting in 4th place with a 7-5 record. Hart leads the Foothill League with an 8-2 record. West Ranch and Saugus are in 2nd place with 7-3 records. Castaic is hanging on to a playoff spot with a 5-5 record in the Foothill League and a 14-11 record overall. So, Tim, how did Hart manage to pull off the upset against West Ranch, who were previously leading the league?
Okay, let's talk about these 2 games between Hart and West Ranch. They were very exciting games, 2 very exciting games that happened last week. So in the first one, Hart won the first game 2-1. And I don't want to say it was all one player that won this game, but Hart's Eddie Gutierrez had a huge game. He came up big when he needed to, when Hart needed him to. He went 3 for 3. He had a home run in the second inning to give Hart a 2-1 lead, and Hart never gave up the lead after that. So all the runs were scored in the first 2 innings, and Eddie Gutierrez hit the game-winning home run in the second inning, and then Hart just shut West Ranch down. So it all became defense and pitching after that, and Eddie Gutierrez provided all the offense that Hart needed to win that game. Now the second game was even more exciting. West Ranch was leading 2-1 going into the 6th inning. That 2-1 lead, they were going to get revenge. It looked like they were going to bounce back after losing that first game. But Hart scored 4 runs in the 6th inning and took a 5-2 lead. In this game, it was Ryan De La Maza who came up with the big hit. He had a 2-run double. and basically the 2-run double gave Hart the 5-2 lead, and that was all the offense that Hart needed. So they scored 4 runs in the 6th inning, took the lead, and were able to hold on to win that game. And one more note I wanted to bring up here: Eddie Gutierrez, after the first game against Hart, when he hit the home run and went 3 for 3, he has a 448 batting average on the season, from what I can tell from statistics from other people. But he's batting 448 and just having a huge season. So he had a great game, kept up his big season, and Hart pulled off two huge wins to move into first place in the Foothill League standings.
All right, so let's talk about Foothill League softball now. So Valencia shut out West Ranch 11-0 and beat Canyon 2-1. Saugus won a pair of games too. The Centurions beat Hart 8-4 and Golden Valley 8-4. It was a bad loss for Hart, dropping the Indians to 3rd place in the Foothill League standings. Hart bounced back to beat Castaic 18-2, but Canyon has emerged as a spoiler in the Foothill League. They played Valencia in a close game and lost by 1 run. And they also shut out Golden Valley 3-0. So, Tim, can Valencia continue undefeated and solidify their lead in the Foothill League?
Yeah, I don't think Valencia has much to worry about at this point. Valencia looks like it's going to win the Foothill League championship. They have a 3-game lead, and I think there's only 2 games left to play. So they're in the driver's seat. They don't have much to worry about. Now, where the real battle is for 3rd place. There's Hart and West Ranch that are tied for 3rd place with 5-5 records, and Canyon's come out of nowhere to be the surprise of the Foothill League. They're 4-6. They're a game behind, and they've been playing very well lately. They're winning games and winning in surprising ways. So I don't think anybody wants to play Canyon. I don't think anybody wants to test Canyon at this point. And they are winning games. So if they can win a couple games here and Hart and West Ranch lose again, Canyon could find itself in the playoff hunt and maybe even in 3rd place in the Foothill League standings. So that's where the real drama is right now. It's in the race for 3rd place between Hart, West Ranch, and Canyon.
All right, so let's talk about Major League Baseball, the Dodgers. The Dodgers went 2-4 last week, losing 2 games to the Washington Nationals and 2 games to the New York Mets. Now, there's no shame in losing a series to the Mets. They're a good team, but losing 2 games in a series to the Nationals is embarrassing, especially at Dodger Stadium. So the Dodgers get another shot at the Nationals this week in DC and play the Blue Jays in Toronto to the end of the week. So I was thinking of what to talk about on this one, Tim, but I guess the only question I have is why? Why is this happening?
Yeah, I can't talk about the Dodgers right now because they're playing so badly. They losing 2 games to the Nationals is bad, and losing 2 games to them at home is even worse. I mean, the Nationals are one of the worst teams in the league. So I don't really want to talk about the Dodgers this week. I wanted to skip them.
Okay, that's enough about the Dodgers then. So let's talk about Indy cars. So the Grand Prix of Long Beach was Sunday. Colton Herta, who grew up right here in Santa Clarita, was the runner-up in the race. And Tim, you were able to talk to Colton before the race and ask him about what he likes to do when he comes back home to Santa Clarita, among some other things. Do you want to talk about that?
Yes. I got to talk to Colton. And just to let everybody know, Colton's dad, Brian Herta, and I went to high school together. We both went to Hart. And so we've known each other since we were freshmen in high school. I think we had classes together when we were in sophomores, but we've known each other, since our time at Hart. And one of the questions I asked Colton was what his first car was. And I can remember what Brian's first car was because we used to drive it around town and go out to lunch in it. And just he used to be the person that we liked driving with because he had a cool car. Brian had one of those old late 70s, maybe 77, 78 Pontiac Firebirds with the big old eagle on the hood, and just one of the traditional muscle cars. It was very fun to drive around with him in that car. But I asked Colton about what his first car was, and not to give too much away, but he bought which is kind of funny. He bought a used BMW and was very proud of it. So let's hear what Colton had to say about growing up in Santa Clarita and
all right,
like
let's go ahead and play this interview. I think it was just before the race, correct? That you interviewed him?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go ahead and play that.
When you come back home to Valencia, come back home to Santa Clarita, what is your favorite place to visit, and what do you like to do when you're back home?
So for me, it's all about food. That's what I miss the most when I'm away from home, is some of the places I grew up going to eat. So when I'm back home, there's a few places. In-N-Out Burger's obviously the biggest place. Mm-hmm. You can get that anywhere in California or on the West Coast. So in Santa Clarita, I love Salitas, which is a Mexican place. I love Tacos Hermanos, which is a taco truck in Castaic. Mm-hmm. And then let's see, I love Masa Ramen, which is a ramen shop in Valencia.
Okay.
So a lot of good places out there, though.
Okay. Let me ask you about your driving history.
Yep.
When did you get your driver's license, and what was your first car?
I got my driver's license at 16, and I purchased a BMW 135i, used like 2008, 2009.
Okay. And what do you drive now, and what would be your dream car to drive around every day?
So I have an Acura MDX, and then I actually just ordered yesterday a RSQ8, which is going to be an awesome car. It's a car that I've looked at for a while. It's basically the 600 horsepower all-wheel drive Audi SUV. It's a big car, so it's it's cool.
So Tim, that was a great interview with Colton Herta. So can you give us a brief rundown of what happened?
Right
at the
right.
Grand Prix?
The race was exciting. The race ended up being one of the better ones I've seen in a long time. Scott Dixon won the race. Scott Dixon is a driver for Chip Ganassi Racing. He won that race for the second time, but it's been years since he won a race there. And it was the 57th career IndyCar Series race win. So he's a veteran. He's been around a while, and he showed it in this race. He was able to get the lead late. It was like, I want to say like 25 laps left in the race. He took the lead during pit stops, and he was in front, but it was clear he didn't have the fastest car. The cars behind him were catching him, and one in particular was driven by Joseph Newgarden, and he drives for Team Penske. So he had the fastest car in the race. It was clear. He was logging faster laps than Scott Dixon. He was catching Scott Dixon, and everybody knew that it was only a matter of time before Newgarden passed Dixon for the lead. But Dick Dixon, like I said, Dixon's a veteran. He knows how to hold off drivers. He knows how to keep his lead. And everybody says he's a master of fuel strategy too. So he knows how to not only keep the lead, but also keep his fuel in reserve for the end of the race. He's just great at that. He's like one of the best drivers ever to do that. So the race is coming to the end. There's about 8 laps to go. And there's this really tight turn at the end of the course. It's a hairpin turn, very, very tight. And Colton was in 3rd place. His teammate was in 4th place. So two Ganassi cars were right behind Newgarden, who was catching Dixon. He was moving fast and getting up to him. So with 8 laps to go, Colton runs into the back of Newgarden in that hairpin turn and lifts him off the ground and basically stalls Newgarden's car. So while Newgarden is trying to get control of his car again, Colton and his teammate pass him. So Colton goes into 2nd place, his teammate goes into 3rd place, and by the time Newgarden gets control of his car again, he's in 4th place and knocked out. And basically, Colton's move knocked Newgarden out of contention, out of the race, damaged his car. Newgarden's car was no longer the fastest car on the track anymore. Now, was it intentional or was it just a racing bump? And I called it a bump and run. I called it a bump and run when I saw it. And Colton even said that he misjudged the turn. Now, whether or not it was intentional, whether or not it should have been a move that was penalized is what's up for debate. After the race, Newgarden said that Colton should have been penalized You know, you knock a person off the track, you knock him, he said, 2 feet off the ground and stall somebody else's car. Whether or not it's intentional, it should be a penalty. And Colton said after the race that not only would he not like that have happened to him in a race, but that he probably should have been penalized. You know, he said, I don't know. He said it was borderline. He said it was a borderline call, but if IndyCar was going to penalize him, he thought that he should have been forced to go behind Newgarden for those last 8 laps or whatever 7 laps that was left in the race. He shouldn't have been able to improve his track position after running into another driver. So he admitted that, but IndyCar decided after the race that there was no penalty. And so they kept Colton in second place. Newgarden dropped to 4th place. Scott Dixon won the race. Scott Dixon had nothing to do with what was going on behind him. It was funny because he was out in front. He was not struggling, but you could tell that he was fighting everybody behind him, because even Colton's car was faster than Dixon's at the end of the race. I mean, Colton probably could have caught him, but I think he was playing it safe at the end there and was happy with second place at that point. If he could get away with second place out of that race after hitting another car and after knocking what everybody thought was the fastest car out of the race, Colton was not going to take any chances to try to pass Dixon and just like I said, be happy with second place and get out of Long Beach with the podium finish. So a lot of controversy at the end of that race.
So I take it that Joseph Newgarden was upset with the race control's decision regarding the contact with Herta.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. He was interviewed after the race, and on TV, I saw him saying that IndyCar should have penalized Colton for that incident. And he didn't really blame Colton for running into him, but he also said that you can't ignore a driver running into another driver. And he said, if that's the case, if that's the new rule, he's going to start knocking cars out of the way in other races. You know, that isn't the way you should be racing in Indy cars. I mean, aside from the fact that they go so fast and the cars are so powerful that doing something like that could end tragically. It's just not good racing. It's not good racing to have to knock somebody out of your way to gain position. That's not the way you're supposed to do it. So Newgarden was mad, and Colton even said after the fact that after the race that Newgarden told him he wasn't happy with him, and Colton even said afterward, if that happened to me, I wouldn't be happy with you. So it was a unfortunate move. It was, like Colton said, it was a misjudged turn at the end of the race, and it ended up being a factor. It ended up determining the outcome of the race for second, third, and fourth place anyway.
So you mentioned fuel management. So how did fuel management play a role in the race, especially for Scott Dixon in the final laps? Right.
So this became a very what's the right word for this? This became a very split strategy that teams took in this race. So there was an early caution about lap 15. One of the cars spun out, ran into the wall, and the race leaders decided to pit. So there was about, I want to say, like 6-7 cars that stayed out on the track. They kept their track position, and Scott Dixon was one of them. Colton was another one too. Joseph Newgarden was in that group as well. So they decided to stay out on the track and stay in their positions. A bunch of the drivers who were leading the race, including the pole sitter, they pitted, and they got fuel, they got tires, and they were on this different pit strategy. And they were hoping for a late caution in the race so that they could conserve their fuel and not have to pit again late in the race. That didn't work out. So Scott Dixon and Newgarden and Colton were on a different, the traditional pit strategy, the one that the teams were going to use when the race started. They didn't adjust their pit strategy at all. So pit strategy ended up becoming a big, big factor in this race too. Scott Dixon kept the traditional pit strategy, and when he pitted, I want to say around lap 60, he came in with enough fuel, with the bright right tires. everything was perfect on the car to finish the race. And Newgarden and Colton were in that same boat. You know, they fueled up, they had plenty of gas, they had the right tires on, and they didn't gamble on a late caution, because a late caution could have bunched everybody up, and who knows what happens after a restart with like 10 laps to go. So it ended up working in Scott Dixon's favor, that he kept his original pit strategy and was able to do his last pit stop when he did, because it gave him plenty of fuel, plenty of track position, and plenty of the right tires. So it all worked out for Scott Dixon. They made the right call, and that ended up being as much a factor in the race as Colton running into Newgarden.
So, and this is a final question, Tim. So what led to Honda's strong performance with a 1-2-3 finish at the Long Beach Grand Prix?
Right. This was huge too. Honda flipped all three positions. They got the top three spots, and I won't say they were struggling, but coming into the race, the Team Penske cars, and they use Chevrolet engines. They were the best cars in the season opener in St. Petersburg, and they have been at the top of the stands. There's only been one race. Long Beach was the second race in the series, but the Penske cars, the Chevrolet powered cars, were the best cars by far at the season opener. And with Honda showing so well in Long Beach, it has to give those Honda teams confidence, because they I won't say they were struggling, like I said, but they were definitely looking for ways to gain on the Chevrolet cars. So sweeping the top three spots was a good sign for Honda teams, and it's a good sign for Chip Ganassi and Global Andretti, which is a team that Colton races for. They use Hondas as well. So they are going to they're going to use the Long Beach race as a way to vault into the rest of the season, and I think it's a good sign that the Honda cars had a good showing in Long Beach.
All right, so that's our show. Tune in next week for more discussions about the news from Santa Clarita. You can listen to us on the radio at KQRU 107.9 FM at 9 on Saturday mornings. You can also watch us on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, and listen to us on SantaClaritaStar.com, wherever you listen to podcasts. So leave us a comment and be sure to subscribe to Santa Clarita Weekly online. So thanks for listening. Have a great week.
Thank you for listening to Santa Clarita Weekly. You can watch the show on Santa Clarita Star's YouTube channel and Facebook page, as well as listen in on the radio at KQRU 107.9. Visit SantaClaritaStar.com for more content and tune in right here to KQRU 107.9. A new voice for Santa Clarita.